Hello and welcome to Paper Classroom's module on pressing. In this short session, the questions we'll be answering are: why do we press the sheet at all? What are the different types of press? Why are press felts so important? And finally, what can go wrong in the press section? Okay, let's start with the reasons for pressing. There are the primary reasons for pressings, which is removal of water and consolidation of the sheet. Removal of water is getting more and more important because the more water we remove at this stage, then the less water there is to remove in the next stage, which is the drying stage. And that's where the huge energy bill is incurred. So everyone realizes that in order to reduce energy in the drying section, you've got to remove as much water as possible in the press section. And the other primary reason is consolidation of the sheet. And what we mean by consolidation of the sheet is pressing those fibres as close together as we possibly can, so that the more intimate contact the fibres have, the more likely that the hydrogen bonds that we need to hold these fibres together will form. And there are two secondary reasons for pressing. And the secondary reasons are, caliper reduction, getting the sheet a little thinner if it needs to be, or maybe increasing the smoothness. But as I say, they're just secondary considerations. Okay, let's look at press designs. There are many different ways of looking at presses. There are which way round we run the rolls. There's how we configure them. Do we run 1, 2, 3 together? But what I'm looking at here are just an individual press roll and how they have developed. The first type of press that was formed was this one, the so-called plane press. Here we have two solid rolls. We have there, as you can see, the fabric, the press felt or press fabric. Used to be wool, now it's man-made material. And here we have the sheet. So what happens in this case is the water gets squashed between the rolls, it moves out of the sheet into the press fabric and then gets carried away. That was okay, but there's a limit to how much water you can remove or how quickly you can remove the water. So another development was the so-called suction press. Here we replace this solid roll with a hollow roll with lots of holes on it, and there we have a vacuum device. So now, as the sheet travels through the system, water gets squashed out. It doesn't stay in the felt to be removed later. It passes straight through the felt and into this suction chamber. So now you can remove more water at the same time. Of course that has problems because you've got to pay for the vacuum and you need more maintenance. These vacuum seals are often going. So another option was to change the roll here, not for a solid roll, but to either blind drill holes in it or cut out a spiral groove or even do both. And what you're doing this way is, again, you're creating a path for the water to go straight through the sheet. So again, the water will get squashed out of the paper into the felt, and now it can come through the felt and into these recesses and then get cast off as this turns. Well, what you should have picked up from this is that it's the felt that removes the water. So another option was, well, why don't we put two felts on a press? So now we can remove twice as much water, and as a bonus, the water only has half the distance to move now. It only needs to move from the middle of the paper into its nearest felt. And the most modern development in press sections is this final one, the shoe press. In all the other cases, we have two rolls coming together like this. So the point of contact, the nip, is very small. By now having this shoe configuration, we have the shoe, we have the roll that sits in it, and this nip is now up to 10 times longer, which means we can do 10 times as much work for the same pressure. Or we can do maybe 5 times as much work at a lot less pressure, and therefore we do less damage to the sheet. Well, there's a whole lot more to presses, and that's for one of our face-to-face courses. Press clothing, sometimes you hear me refer to it as a press felt. It used to be called a press felt because literally it was wool felted together. Then we brought out man-made fabrics, so now they became called either press fabrics or press clothing. These fabrics are made from multi-filament yarns, and what I've tried to do here is to demonstrate it. So there you've got 4 man-made fibres twisted together to give this sort of side-on structure. And what you can see here, there's a space there and there's little spaces here. So the idea with press clothing is you create a lot of spaces, and then the yarns are put together. So there you see weft yarns going from left to right on the machine. Here you see warp yarns going in the machine direction, more weft yarns, quite strong thick fibres. By having nice strong fibres you will create a strength to that piece of clothing, and by having thick fibres you're creating all these spaces in between, and that's where the water goes when it gets squeezed out of the paper. If we only had thick fibres, then they would leave a mark on the sheet, which we don't want. So these fabrics are often layered now. They could be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers sometimes, with finer fibres to the outside, which will do less damage to the sheet. What I tell my students is the important part of these fabrics is not the fibres that you can see, it's actually the holes in the middle that you can't see. These holes are like little buckets, and the buckets are there to carry away all the water that's been squeezed out in the press section. So this is why dirty fabrics are bad. If these holes get clogged up with chemicals or bits of fibre or bits of filler, then they're no longer available to carry away the water. If sticky materials seal the surface of here, then the water cannot get through into that area, so it can't be carried away. So fabrics are very, very important, and they deserve a lot more attention than they often get. And you know, the final section really is on pressing faults. What happens when things go wrong? Well, if we start to push out water too fast, we get these crushing faults, and crushing faults look like tiny little wiggly lines going in the cross direction on the sheet, and what's happening is we're forcing out the water too fast. As the water gets pushed out, rather than going round the fibres like it should do, it pushes the fibres in front of it and aligns them all in the cross direction, and that's the mark that we see. Creasing, if rolls are not aligned correctly, if the tension is not right, then the paper can fold over on itself sometimes and cause creasing marks. Shadow marking. At the point where the sheet comes off the couch on the forming section, or when it goes over the type of press that uses a suction roll, then if there's too much vacuum applied, or if we have the wrong press felt there, then you will suck fines and filler particles out of the sheet in the area where those holes are. And if you take that sheet and you hold it up to the light, then you will see these light rings where you've sucked out fibre and filler, and this is what we call shadow marking. Blow marks. Well, we have the felt coming along, we have the sheet coming along, and then they go into the press nip. And if we get air trapped in there for some reason, if the angle is wrong, or if the felts are dirty and the air can't escape, then as it comes into the press, air has got to go somewhere. It can't go through a solid press roll. It can't go through your fabric because it's maybe too dirty. And the only place for it to go is through the sheet. And therefore what it does is it forces its way through the sheet, it blows a bubble in the sheet, it stretches the sheet and then pops and then collapses. And we get two little parallel lines in the machine direction where all the stretched material has collapsed. And that's what we call a blow mark. Well, that was one of my shorter presentations. I hope you've enjoyed this taster session on pressing. There's a huge amount more to pressing than we've covered in this section. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you on one of my formal courses.